And we are live. Here we go for a second in the series of 8 on the Sacred Feminine series. We are starting tonight with Kuan Yin. Now, things to know about Kuan Yin. There are many spellings to her name. So you can see that under descriptions, I wrote it with a K-W-A-N space Y-I-N. Now, the name Kuan Yin, depending on which part of Asia you're in, has different spellings, but it's always the same person. So the same way as different languages will spell the same name different ways, like Jean, John, and Juan are all meaning the same name, but they're spelled differently depending on the language and the culture and the area where you're in. Now, what's more important is what is the meaning of her name. Her name means observing the sound and cries of the human world. She doesn't just observe, she's there to help us. The many place where Kuan Yin is known is mainly in Asian culture. She's highly respected. We'll see today that she's now known as a woman. One of her main incarnations is said to be a woman, but she is also known as an androgynous, which means she is both male and female, depending on how she's depicted. Varies from area and depending on which legend we base ourselves on which story we're going to use to recall her. So therefore, she's known in Hong Kong as Kunyum, in Japan as Kanon or Kanzeon. But the spelling is sometimes with a W, which goes to Kwanon. And it varies also on pre-modern pronunciation and future or modern times. In Korea, she's Kwannom. In Thailand, she's Kwan Yin. And in Vietnam, she's Kuan Yin. But in all of those places, she's always the same person. But now, who is she? Kuan Yin is synonymous with the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara, the pinnacle of mercy, compassion, kindness, and love. If out of the 4, we were to pick one specific one that really applies to Kuan Yin, it would be compassion. We'll see why tonight. The meaning of each word, Bodhisattva, is a being of body or an enlightened being who has returned to, she's earned the right to leave the world of suffering and is destined to become a Buddha, meaning an enlightened one, but has foregone the bliss of nirvana, which is paradise, more precisely, the end of reincarnation, with a vow to save all the children of God. So basically, a Bodhisattva is someone who is going to stay present in physical form in this world until everyone has stopped suffering. That is the vow of a Bodhisattva. The second part of her name, Avalokitesvara, the word means seeing or gazing down, and asvara is the sound or noise. So therefore, it would loosely translate in English as the one who hears the cry of sentient being who needs help. Now, this is very important because it doesn't say humans, it says sentient beings, meaning that if a dog is suffering, she will hear its cries. If a dolphin is suffering, it will hear its cries. So it will hear anything that is sentient. Now, it is my belief that trees, flowers are also sentient, so she can hear their suffering as well. Now, through time, we experienced this when I was talking about Mary Magdalene last week. We have different books or writings that we refer to when we do the research and when we try to find information, specific information. And it would appear that Before, her name was written with Avara, which means the sound, and eventually the A became an E, and with Evara, now the word means Lord. So the one-letter difference happened around the 7th century, which means in the years 600 and something. So the meaning changed to Avalokitesvara, which is Creator God. And that's not who she is. She's the one who hears the suffering. So that's a good point to make, so that you understand that depending on which text people refer to, which faith they believe in, then the meaning of who Kuan Yin actually is may vary. Kuan Yin is one of the very rare goddesses that is transcendent amongst many religions. And we'll see that tonight. And so she transcends just one belief. She is the main image for the highest goddess in the Asian culture, which is why I picked her for tonight's talk. She first appeared in the 25th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, and is represented as the higher being than any other being in the Buddhist cosmology, but that's based on the new term that appeared in the 7th century. About her being a female, because we're talking on a sacred feminine. Because she is taking the form of a man at first and a woman then, and her body changes, morphs. She represents the idea that any gender, male or female, adult or child, human or non-human being, can be taught the Dharma, the rules of enlightenment, to become to all sentient beings. So she doesn't differentiate as humans being better than. She is there for all sentient beings. Why sentient beings? Because sentient beings have the ability to think and to choose. So therefore, if they are sentient, they're feeling, and they can cause pain, and can choose to not do those things. In order to study the Dharma, one needs to be aware. And so one needs to be sentient. Otherwise, you wouldn't teach a rock how to become an enlightened being. Now, an enlightened being, first Kuan Yin was, we see her in Chinese culture. And she's known as the one who perceives the sounds of the world. But she was also, which is very interesting, given the name of Goddess of Mercy, or the Mercy Goddess, by the Jesuit missionaries that came to China. And so even they had to respect the figure that Kuan Yin represented. And her position in the culture was so important that she couldn't be denied who she was. And so when they referred to her, the Jesuit missionaries were having to refer to her as the Goddess of Mercy. In the 19th day of the 6th lunar moon, and that's something that we're going to see in our final podcast. I'm going to explain on her. And that is the day that is known as Kuan Yin's attainment of Buddhahood. And that's when she's celebrated. And it's very interesting because she always seems to be in the middle of something. She's in the middle of the year, she's in the middle of the month, she's in the middle. If we remember the talk that we did on the middle way, it goes to explain that she chose the middle way. She chose to be walking this path of witnessing and of being present and living in the now, which is the way of the middle. Now, her origins, they were as a venerated figure. She was introduced in China as early as the 1st century after Jesus Christ. And it reached Japan by the way of Korea soon after Buddhism was introduced in the country in the mid-7th century. So again, when her name kind of got changed. So I'm formulating an hypothesis here that because her influence grew, because the knowledge of her grew, and because people started to pray to her and to venerate her, more text about her was written. And maybe we when we write, we don't always write perfect letters, and that's where the confusion could have happened, is when there was a sudden growth and a sudden need for the text on Kuan Yin, and so the translation might have been rushed, and that's where it might have been mistranscribed. Now, the representation, meaning the pictures that we can see of Kuan Yin, a beautiful Asian woman, full of symbolism, was during the Song Dynasty in China, was represented as in a masculine appearance, which is very interesting, because her last incarnation would have been that of a princess. But she was generally accepted that because of that change of the letter from an A to an E, which made her a lord and not a noise, they depicted her in a male form. But also because all representation of Bodhisattva were masculine. So it appeared that only men, up until Kuan Yin, could achieve enlightenment. And there were no great teachers and there were no great guides together. And this one, they were able to do this because a Bodhisattva, in accordance to the Lotus Sutra, the origins that explains Bodhisattva and their vow, as the magical power to transform their body into any form that is required to relieve the suffering. So, therefore, Kuan Yin became neither men nor women. She became androgynous. This means that this is beautiful, removed the obstacle to gender enlightenment. Now women could also become enlightened beings. The women that I choose during these Sacred Feminine series are very important because they changed the way things were done for women, but they did so. There was no big revolution or feminism war at that time. But what they managed to do is open the way for all the women following them into a new world, a new way of being, and a new opportunity for them to be able to listen to the teachings and maybe become nuns and work towards enlightenment. Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, she Kuan Yin, she meaning, it's another form of her name, is an allegation of her name, is therefore resorts to a variety of shapes and travels in the world, conveying the beings to salvation. So she doesn't just hear the complaints or the noise or the pain of the people. She travels the world to help us heal and allowing us to be relieved of our pain. This is a lot more than just listening to the noise. She takes an active part in helping us heal and helping us be at peace and finding this enlightenment for ourselves. The all-female form, eventually around the 12th century and during the Ming Dynasty, is when they settled on an all-female form for her. The representation and symbolism after that remained constant. How do you recognize her? Kuan Yin is most often represented as a beautiful, absolutely beautiful, white-robed woman, and the white being the symbol for purity. She is usually wearing a necklace, familiar with the Indian or Chinese royalty. Sometimes prayer beads. The prayer beads represents the prayer she does for the world. She's often sitting in a lotus, symbolizing purity, peace, and harmony. The right hand might hold a jug of water, and this water contains pure water, the divine nectar of life, of compassion, and of wisdom. So she is known for compassion. She's known for the other things as well. She's known as a very wise being and a giver of life, or a fertility symbol. But compassion being her main attribute, if you want to say. In her left hand, she might hold a willow branch. In shamanic ceremonies, the willow branch is a soft kind of branch, and it's used to sprinkle divine nectar of life for blessing upon the devotees. And so they can be blessed in the physical world and with spiritual peace. The idea of the willow branch, why that one and not another one, is the symbol to be able to bend or to adapt, but not to break. The willow is used also for its medicinal purposes. And we'll see in the original myth of Kuan Yin, in her last physical incarnation, that she believed in healing very much. She wanted to heal the woes of the world. And so she was interested in medicine and curing the sick. So the symbolism around her of these medicine makes sense. The crown that she will be depicted as usually inside of it, Amitabha Buddha, the fully conscious infinite light. So it was her teacher before she became Bodhisattva. Her teacher is said to be Amitabha Buddha. She'll be accompanied by a bird in some depiction. Most of the time it's a dove, but it could also be a parrot. And this often means fertility. And so she is prayed to by a lot of women around the world to conceive children. The necklace, or the rosary, so not the royal necklace from before, but the rosary, it's associated to each bead is representing all the living beings. And as she prays with the beads, and as she meditates with the beads, and as she's turning the beads, it symbolizes Kuan Yin leading them out of their state of misery and repeated rounds of rebirth into nirvana, where the end of all suffering, because suffering is on earth. Suffering is during our rebirth and our life in this human body. If we can cease the cycle of reincarnation, that is when we truly reach heaven, nirvana. Hence, the bead represent enlightenment that she bestows on people as she prays for them. Sometimes she will also be found with a book of scrolls of paper, and those represent the Dharma. Dharma is the word that we could say would be like gospel or scriptures. It's what she uses to teach herself and then the others. This inside of those Dharma, the teaching of Buddha, the Buddhist texts, Kuan Yin is said to have constantly been reading them. This is part of our regular rituals in the Buddhist tradition, to recite the actual Dharma. Most of the Dharma are written to have a certain song to them, or a certain inclination of sound to them. And we're going to see that with Kuan Yin, this is part of a healing method. I visited a lot of temples all over the world, and the one that always surprised me the most was the one statue of this woman that has the 1,000 arms. So we've all, I think, seen that one place or another. And I never truly understood who that was. That is actually Kuan Yin. It's a different representation of her, based on her myth of her last physical incarnation on this planet, where she was granted 1,000 eyes and 1,000 arms. The eyes are actually inside the palm of her hands. And as she stretches her hand towards the world to help the world, then her eyes also see. So she's able to now hear and see the suffering and have enough hands to help the people. The Bodhisattva's vow is to never rest until all sentient beings are free of the cycle of rebirth. So as long as people are being born, the cycle of rebirth is continuing. So technically, she is still among us. Now, despite all the efforts that she was trying to help the people, she came to realize that there were many unhappy beings. Now remember, not just humans, but sentient beings, to be saved. And she struggled to comprehend the needs of so many. And that's when it's said that her head split open into 11 pieces. And the Buddha Amitabha, seeing her difficulty and her plight, decided to give her 11 heads. So usually the statue with 1,000 arms will have 11 heads. Now that she has 11 heads, so technically 22 ears, she is now able to hear and differentiate all the cries for help and comprehend them. And as she attempted to reach out with all those in need, she found that her 2 arms shattered to pieces. And once more, Amitabha came to her head and appointed her 1,000 arms to let her reach to all those in need. And so that's why she is depicted this way. There's many different versions to this tale. In the Himalayan version, she only has 8, in which meaning that she's holding the Dharma, which has 8 principle-based ideas. And so with those 8 hands, she's supporting the teachings and able to bring it to more people. The idea of Buddhism is that your salvation is your own. And that's very interesting, because that is one of the things that we learned from Mary Magdalene's podcast, was that we cannot be ignorant. We need to learn. We need to make our own steps to make the right decision and the right choices. And so she's the image of the ultimate teacher, holding all the Dharma principle and trying to reach out to the world and allowing us to learn from the teachings of Buddha. Now, there's the Chinese version of Kuan Yin. We saw a different one for the Himalayas, which Himalayas covers India, and it covers into Tibet, and it goes into China area. But there's also, in the same Asian culture, there's the Taoist people, the Taoist faith. The Tao means to follow the way. So again, we're going back to following this path, following this journey. The Tao believe that the currents of the yin and yang need to be balanced into the world. So not just in themselves, but in the world. So the work that they do is usually to balance this current. They'll practice breath control, mind-body exercise, and a lot of meditation. She is recognized in the Tao by the Taoist as the perfect person, having an endless willingness and sparing no effort in helping those in need. So she has attained enlightenment, but she is still, until the very end, going to be willing and sparing no effort to help those in need. So she is the one that a lot of people would pray to because of her compassion, no matter what you did wrong, or no matter how bad you think the things you have done, and you're seeking for some help, because she's the goddess of mercy, Kwan Yin is going to come to your aid. And so she's revered by the Buddhists and the Taoists alike. Now, in a lot of the different ascended masters, there's some information sometimes available onto at least their very last incarnation before they ascended as master. What's different about Kuan Yin is that although she has the title of a goddess, she didn't ascend to nirvana. She stayed in this earth plane to help us out because of her Bodhisattva vow. And so there's a monk, a Buddhist monk, Qian Qinqi, that around 1100 after Christ penned down a legend that has been passed down orally in the oral traditions for a very long time. This person in the legend is a Buddhist saint, Miao Shan. She was a Chinese princess, and she lived about 700 years before Christ, right? So before this story was penned down, almost 2,000 years went by, which is very interesting because the oral tradition survived. And there's, depending on which version that you read, they're very, very, very close in the storyline. So I will explain the three variations. And the three variations have to do with her death. But the rest of the stories is always the same in all the documentation. So it is believed that she was actually Princess Miao Chan. And she, this princess, this saint, had a religious following on Fragrant Mountain. Now, I would love to tell you where exactly Fragrant Mountain is, but I wasn't able to satisfy my curiosity and find that out. But the story goes that she was the youngest daughter of three daughters of a king who asked her to marry a very wealthy man. However, this man was not kind. And so we'll call her Kuan Yin from now on. Kuan Yin decided to tell the king that she would marry if her marriage, the marriage itself, would be three misfortune. Because she didn't intend to marry this. But Kuan Yin wanted to ease the suffering of the people injured as they age. She wanted to also ease the suffering of the people who fall ill. And she wanted to ease the suffering caused by death. And the king, their father, said, well, where would I find such a man? And so Kuan Yin, Miao Shan, the princess, said that a healer could help ease the suffering of all these things. So predominantly, already Miao Shan wanted to reduce people's suffering. She wanted to heal the wounds that were existing in her lifetime. And if she couldn't find a man to marry that would ease those suffering in the world, then she wanted to be free to retire and live a life in a monastery as a nun. So her father grew very angry with her because that's not what he wanted. He didn't want her to marry a healer. He wanted her to marry a person of power and wealth. So he forced her into hard labor. He reduced her food and drink. And that didn't work. So I guess, although she was a very compassionate being, she was also, to a certain degree, very strong, very determined, and she would not yield to the command by her father. And if we trace back to almost 2,000 years ago, well, no, sorry, that would be almost 3,000 years ago now. Back then, obeying a daughter disobeying her father was outrageous. It was not done. And so since she wouldn't yield, the father, the king, said, fine, you want to go to a temple, you want to go in a monastery, you can go. Because that's what she was begging for. She wanted to become a nun. She didn't want to get married. So her father allowed her to work in the temple, but he made sure that the monks gave her the very hard chores in order to discourage her. And this is very interesting because this is the part where we're almost in the Cinderella story, because she has to work day and night, and while the others are sleeping, she has to work until the very late hours in the night to finish all of her work. And this is where we get into almost Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, is that she was such a good person that the living animals around her, the temples, began to help her with her chores. Talks about snakes, talks about different animals helping her dig out the vegetable garden and bringing water and collecting apples and helping her with her tasks. And this might be why Kuan Yin is there for sentient being and not just human beings, because she understood that the animals' kingdom around her was very much capable of understanding the suffering as they suffered, and they were able to help. And in the Chinese tradition, a white snake actually reached through enough personal work, enlightenment. So therefore, it is recognized that in the Chinese tradition, at the very least, animals can attain enlightenment just as humans can. So her father became extremely frustrated with her because he wasn't getting anywhere and she just was doing the tasks and she just kept doing it every day, that he decided to attempt to burn the temple. And Miao Shan, the princess, put out the fire with her bare hands and suffered no burns. And it's interesting because at this point, you would see that she's accomplishing miracles, that she's very special indeed. And yet, this struck fear in the heart of her father, and he ordered her to be put to death. And this is where the story varies a little bit. There's 3 versions of her death. In the first version, Miao Shan was executed, but a supernatural tiger took her to one of the hell realms of the dead. However, instead of being punished by the demons like other inmates or other people being brought down to hell, Miao Shan plays music and flowers blossom around her and completely surprises the demons. Miao Shan, by merely being in that hell, turned it into a paradise. So she dies, but a supernatural tiger takes her body and brings it to hell. And then while she's there, being who she is, this being of light, she turns hell into paradise. The second one is she actually allows for her death to take place. It's not very, very different than the first version, but it has an effect later on the people, and I'll explain why. So she's being put to death, and her executioner tries to carry out the king's orders, but his axe shattered into 1,000 pieces. And so then he decides that since he doesn't have an axe, he'll take his sword, and with the sword, he tries to cut off her head. And again, it shatters into 1,000 pieces. And so then he says, fine, all he has left is arrows. And so he tries to shoot her down with arrows, but all the arrows are veering around her. So finally, in desperation, he's got nothing left. So he's trying to use his hands to kill her. And that's when Miao Shan realizes the fate of the executioner. This is very important. This is where the compassion of Kuan Yin kicks in. She realizes that if he can't execute her, the king will be very, very displeased and most likely will kill him. And so in order to not make him fail, she lets herself die. And in doing so, forgives the executioner for attempting to kill her. So technically, he didn't kill her. She allowed herself to die. So it is said that as she's doing this, she took on the massive karmic guilt that the executioner generated by killing her and left him without karma. And because of that, she went to hell. Now, see, now we have a reason why this being didn't actually go to heaven, which for some reason didn't really make sense in the first version. In this version, it explains that it's because she took on the karmic debt of someone else and freed them. And then because of this debt, she's the one going down to hell. And there's many realms of hell, just like there's in the Divine Comedy, there's 9 circles of hells. Even in Buddhism, there's different realms. In the one she lands, she witnessed firsthand the suffering and the horrors the beings have to endure, and was overwhelmed with grief. Now, if you're being brought to hell, it's because you've done something while you were in a physical form, and you harm people, and you cause problems, and depending on which hell realm you're in, I imagine if she's in the executioner realm, which means that you're taking someone's life, it must have been one of the worst areas she could have landed in. However, that filled her with compassion, and she released all the good karma she had accumulated through many, many lifetimes, and she freed the suffering souls either back to heaven and back to earth. giving them a second chance. In the process, again, Helmaram became like a paradise. So you can see that although it's a little bit of a different ending, or it's not very an ending, but it's a little bit different, it still turns hell into a paradise. However, Yan Luo, the king of hell, sent her back to her and said, I can't have her here because she's destroying my realm. And so he decided to ship her back. And it is said that she reappeared on Fragrant Mountain. Now, this is very interesting because I love making parallels, right? I'm all about omnimism, and I'm all about finding what one religion or one culture dictates, and instead of trying the differences, seeing how similar things can be. She died, and she comes back. Now, who else has done that we know? Well, Jesus did that, right? So he died, and he came back. Where he went during his 3 days, we don't know. But apparently, when the princess went to hell and turned it into paradise, she got kicked out. And she reared to a supernatural tiger. So again, we have the tiger coming in and is believed to be the goddess living on Fragrant Mountain. So, but technically it's not wrong. She didn't die. She was still alive when she showed up on Fragrant Mountain. Now, what happened in between is our concept of life. That is, for some of us, means that she died, and for some of us, she never did. Now, how can I explain that? First of all, she reincarnated in the body of light. Second of all, just like Mary Magdalene taught us last week, Kuan Yin was teaching, and we'll see that the body is only a clothing that we can shed. And so the soul never dies. So technically she didn't die. The soul that is her, Kuan Yin, and didn't die because her last body of the incarnation of Miao Shan did. Very good. Just reading the comment here, making sure that there's no question. Very good. So the legend ends saying Miao Shan's father, the king, then fell ill with jaundice, or in some cases he turned blind because of a plague. But in any case, no physicians were able to cure him. And then the monk that comes to him, and because the king's orders had to be obeyed, and he says that his particular illness could be cured by making medicine out of the arm and eye of one without anger. Now, who could be most without anger other than the most compassionate person in the world, and who forgave the executioner and even took his karma from him? So the monks further suggest that such a person could be found on Fragrant Mountain. And this is why I think that in that reappearance on Earth, she was no longer Miao Shan, more Kuan Yin, because the father, the king, doesn't understand that woman on Fragrant Mountain is his daughter. Just like when Jesus Christ came back in his body of light, they didn't recognize him in the gardens, right? So there's something, it was still her, but something had changed, something had shifted. And when they went to ask Miao Shan if she would willingly offer her eyes and arms, she said yes. And so the king was cured out of his illness and went to Fragrant Mountain to give his thanks to this person. Then, and only then, did he discover that it was his own daughter that had made the sacrifice. And this is where he asked and begged for forgiveness. This is truly what Kuan Yin represents, all this compassion and this love and the ending of suffering. She didn't see giving these things out as adding to her suffering, but as reducing someone else's. So the story concludes that she transformed into a 1,000-armed Kuan Yin, and the king, queen, and her 2 sisters building a temple on the mountain for her. So that would have been the first dedicated Kuan Yin temple ever. So you can see at the end of the story where she becomes Kwan Yin. And another explanation why she would have 1,000 arms is because she gave out the 2 that she had. And in reward, she obtained 1,000 arms and 1,000 eyes. And so she was able to keep helping and keep supporting and being present. This goes along the same idea that whatever you put into the world will be returned to you 1,000-fold. So she gave out her 2 arms, and in reward, she got 1,000. And she also had 1,000 eyes. Now, I want to talk about the Bodhisattva's vow, because it's very important. This vow, as she began her journey to actually go into nirvana, because she was an enlightened being, let's imagine she's going up on a cloud, going to the sky, to this beautiful heaven. And as she's about to cross into heaven, she then starts hearing the cries of the suffering of the world below. And she turned around and saw the massive suffering endured by the people of the world. Filled again with compassion, she forgo living a life of eternity of bliss and joy and love to return to us. And as she returned, she vowed to never leave until such a time that all suffering had ended. So she is among us, but she is in the form of a body of light, which means that she's not constrained or limited with a physical body or limited by time. And so she's able to travel and to be with us when we ask for her help, when we pray to her, when we ask for her support. During her time on Earth as Kwan Yin now, Kwan Yin is said to have stayed a few years on an island of Mount Putuo, where she practiced meditation and helped the sailors and fishermen who got stranded. Kwan Yin is frequently worshipped as a patron for sailors and fishermen because of that. And you have to remember, I've said this before when I talked about Atlantis and I talked about Lemuria. Although these seem far-fetched legend and they seem impossible to us, the strength of the Kuan Yin worship has survived for 3,000 years. And so I find it hard to believe that she didn't really exist and she didn't really help these sailors and sailors and fishermen are not completely stupid. They wouldn't start praying or worshiping someone just out of the blue. And then all of a sudden everybody seems to agree on a name and a place. And I believe she was there and I believe she did help them. She's also known to frequently becalm the sea, which means if there's big waves and it's thunderous and it's dangerous for the boats to be out, she was said to calm the sea. And especially when boats were threatened by rocks and things. So she would save sailors that got stranded on the island, but also while they were at sea. Now, again, I can't help but bring a similarity that the fact that Jesus did the same thing. He was on a boat, and there was a storm, and the apostle and the boat were scared, and Jesus calmed the sea. What does this mean? This means that the teaching from ascended masters, even though they taught from different regions, different parts of the world, they were able to accomplish similar, what we would call miracles, because we don't understand how they're performed. And they were able to heal people, and they were able to be seen in different areas, and they were able to subsist and sustain for hundreds and hundreds of years. Eventually, Kuan Yin left this island decades later, maybe centuries later, and she returned to Fragrant Mountain to continue in her meditation. And we'll see what she's meditating about, and we'll try to connect to her tonight, which should be interesting. It'll be fun. So Kuan Yin is often referred to as the most wildly beloved Buddhist divinity, with miraculous power to assist all of those who pray to her. Now, that's very interesting, because if we link to Mary Magdalene last week, Mary Magdalene was the apostle of the apostle, the most loved apostle. So these women are being revered, they're being honored, and their power is being recognized. But it's not a power to destroy, it's not a power to win wars, it's a power to heal, it's a power to love, it's a power to show compassion to one another. It's a very maternal, very feminine power. So people will pray to her for fertility, for protection, especially while traveling. And we don't always travel by boat anymore, although that was the main modes of travel back then. But whenever traveling, people will ask for her protection. She is said to deliver those who say her name from pain and suffering. So her name is Kuan Yin or Kuan Yin. So if we say her name in prayer, if we pray to her, she is said to be listening and she'll be there to assist you. So now, what does she teach? Right? Because we know where she came from, we know what people expect of her, but what is her teaching that we can get from Kwan Yin? In Japan specifically, the doctrine teaches that God created people to be happy and live harmoniously. This is what she strives towards, is helping us to be happy and to live harmoniously. And so therefore, now she's not just a goddess of fertility or of traveling or healing. She's also helping us achieve this state of peace inside of us and to live harmoniously amongst us. She teaches that in order to discover your true self, you must rid yourself of selfish desires and realize that the body is simply a thing borrowed from God. So this is very important because, hold and behold, Mary Magdalene was teaching us the same thing. She was teaching us to get rid of our selfish desires and that the body is just a garment that we can remove and shed our attachments to our needs, our physical needs. And so we become the body of light. So it resembles very closely to what we learned last week. Why there's those similarities? Some people are like, okay, so why are we fighting wars and having these big huge fight over who's right and who's wrong when they're teaching the same thing? Because the way to get there is different depending on who is the teacher. You have to go back to the original doctrine, the one that is teaching. What is it that they're actually teaching? This is what we have to open our mind to. What Mary Magdalene and what Kuan Yin are teaching is the same. Now, Kuan Yin achieves it through meditation, through breath work, through prayers, through mantras. Mary Magdalene achieved it a different way. And so we were given several teachers throughout history to try and teach us the same things. But, if I've been a tutor in math in my younger years, and I was trying to explain how to solve a mathematical problem. And a student looked at me and he goes, don't know what you're talking about. Makes no sense to me. Let's sample fractions, right? And you're trying to explain that fractions, in order to be added, have to be the same denominator. And they're like, I don't understand that. So imagine that this poor student, 400 is a years, all he has is the same teachings from this teacher, and he still doesn't get it because he'll never get it because that doesn't make any sense. He can't relate to it. There's nothing in his experience that can connect him to what you're trying to explain. And then comes along someone from Italy and says, oh, I can explain fractions to you. Look at this pizza. And now the student has a different way of learning, has a different imagery, has a different explanation. So he's looking down this pizza and he says, yes, how does that relate to fraction? He says, well, a quarter of a pizza. He says, you cut the pizza in four. That's what the number at the bottom means. and the number at the top says how many pizzas you're going to take with you. And all of a sudden the student goes, oh, yes, I understand. He says, what does that have to do with adding? He says, well, now if your other pizza is divided in 8 and you take 3 pieces, then you have to convert the pizza that's cut in 4 to an 8. So you know how many pieces that equals. So you can total how many pieces of pizza are missing at the end. And then the student goes, oh, I get it. I understand. It's so clear. How did I not see that before? It is so simple. In the same way, what we're trying to explain when we're talking about spiritual concepts, it's not complicated. However, if I have only one way of explaining it to you and only one tool to use it, and you're not able to function with this tool and you're not able to understand what this tool is or what's the purpose of it, then the source, the universe, God, sends us a different teacher who's going to explain it differently, who's going to show us a different way, because it doesn't matter if you do it with pieces of pizza, if you can just do it off of paper in numbers, or if you make it with apples, as long as in the end you actually understand and then you can apply the concept to your life, then what does it matter which way you learned? It's the end that leads you to this understanding, this comprehension that really matters. And so this is how you will see the sacred feminine throughout this series. You will see that they were teaching similar things to different cultures, to different parts of the world at different times, but in all to help us understand spiritual concept, to make us happier beings, to free us from our attachment, to free us from our pain. And this is how she teaches us about mercy and kindness. Through her incarnation, through her Bodhisattva's vow, through her acts of kindness. Now, the other important thing that she teaches us, and I think this is the most juicy part, right? It's the teachings, right? Is that we have to have compassion, but not just for us, but for everyone and ourselves. Yeah. So you have to release the judgment of others and yourself. You have to focus on the light and the soul and the other sentient beings around you. So again, she's going a little bit further here because she's including everything that is sentient, not just humans, and loving them for that divine spark that lives in them, this divine light, but recognize it in ourselves as well. She encourages us to be kind and gentle and to be true to who we are. Now, this, you know, in these teachings, people can say, be true to who you are, and then someone say, well, I'm an accountant, so I'll work with numbers. What they mean when you hear the saying, be true to who you are, is be true to the soul that you're incarnated in this body being just a piece of clothing. For example, if I decide to go work in the garden, I will wear gardening clothes. And then if I come back inside, I will wash, I will change, and I will dress up to go out with dinners with my friend. I will change my appearance to be true to what I'm doing. In the same way, if you're unhappy with the life that you're living, you need to shed your unhappiness. If that means for you to go back to school, to look for a different employer, to start your own company, to maybe continue what you're doing, but start developing your spiritual power, it doesn't matter. I'm not saying you should all quit your job, but right now, let's be frank. A lot of people are not working. A lot of people have a lot of times on their hands. They all renovated the house by now. They all fixed everything. They decluttered everything. And now we're at this time where people have taken care of everything that was material, that they've been putting off, that has been on their to-do list forever. And now they're saying, now what? We're still back. We're still stuck at home. We're still not back to normal. What do I do? And in order to be true to you, who you are, you have to know who you are, right? So if you don't know who you are, how can you be true to that? This is extra time that the universe is giving us to spend in introspection as to who we are, what are our dreams, what did we dream about, what did we want to do, what did we put aside because we thought we didn't have the time, we didn't have the money, we didn't have the expertise. It's amazing what you can learn. I program a website from watching YouTube videos. I'm able to do things by repairing a washing machine by watching a YouTube video. And so there's many things that you can learn. And there's a time for you to try these things and try and change your focus in your life. And perhaps it's time for that focus to be more spiritual rather than material. When you're praying with Kuan Yin, excuse me, or that you're doing meditation or mantras, that helps you set to your intent to attract only kind and gentle life lessons and relationship. Other roles. She actually sits on the karmic board with Mary Magdalene. And it's very interesting because depending on which reference material you use, the karmic board is either 7 or 8 people sitting on it. And out of those 7 or 8 people, there's a total of 5 of them that are feminine energy. Mary Magdalene and Kuan Yin being 2 of them. Why is she sitting on the karmic board? Well, we know that she understands the weight of karma. She understands how karma is built, transported from one life to the next, and how it multiplies the cycles of rebirth and death and suffering. And since she was trying very, very hard to eliminate that, by being on the karmic board, she may help weigh in your favor. She is the person to pray to when you need this lifting, this release. And she will help you see the light that is inside of you, see your new power, and see you emerge out of this suffering and find peace. In the Buddhist traditions, mantras are very important. They're written down in the sutras, the books, the paper rolls, and they are repeated. And for those of you who do yoga or meditation, you will find the sound familiar. You will recognize it. I mean, may never have thought that it had anything to do with Kuan Yin. However, these 2 actually do. So I would like to do this with you now. So hopefully either you have the headphones on or you're sitting quietly in a place where you can listen to the sound and repeat after me and not feel too embarrassed. But at the worst, say it in your mind. The mantra takes us outside of time and space and unites us with anyone who's ever chanted the mantra beforehand, including Kuan Yin. So basically, by repeating the mantra, we will be connecting to Kuan Yin. What's our intent? This particular mantra is a heart opening, consciousness rising, and peace finding. So if you're feeling nervous, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling that you're having difficulty opening your heart, loving, or forgiving someone who hurt you, and therefore you don't trust and you don't want to love anymore, this would be the perfect mantra for you. It helps bring in the compassion and the resolution, and that's why it gives you peace. It calls to Kuan Yin particularly, but also to all the unconditional love sentient being and the Divine Mother, and also our soul star. So we're connecting to our soul. We're connecting to Kuan Yin. We'll connect to the Divine Mother and the sea of unconditional love that surrounds us. So the mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum. I'm going to say this again. And then I'm going to chant it for a few minutes, right? So you can enjoy the resonance of my voice and hopefully my throat settles. Or you can sing it along with me if you actually know it. So it's Om Mani Padme Om. If you really want to do this properly, you'll do the entire beads, the japa meditation. So much like a rosary, you will repeat this. I don't know how much time I have left, but I can definitely do a few minutes for you so you can try and connect with Kuan Yin. And you know that you can write down your comments in the live chat for either YouTube or Facebook Live. So it's always nice to hear your comment afterwards. So here we go. Om Mani Padme 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 Om Padme Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Om Padme Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme So there we are. My voice allowed for it. So hopefully the sound came out well at the other end. This is to raise again your heart opening, your consciousness rising, and peace finding. Even as I do this, and I'm aware I'm doing this during a podcast and I'm being filmed, and it's not as relaxing as if I do this in my usual meditated area, but still I could feel a calm coming over me. I could feel the quietness, and I could feel the vibration restoring the higher energy in my body, the higher frequency that is of Kuan Yin. Now, the next mantra that is often used to bring Kuan Yin energy into you or around you in your surroundings or in the situation that is particularly difficult is Om Shanti. Om Shanti is translated to let there be peace. And so if there is peace, there is an end of suffering. And this is why it also belongs in the same frequency as the Kuan Yin energy. So you can either pray to her or you can recite the mantra. Mantras are, my favorite place is often in the car when I'm alone and I'm driving. But apparently, some people told me that can alter your state of mind. It's not a very good idea to do while you're driving. So I'll pass this on to you, not while you're driving. But enjoy the maybe in the shower, or I found that a lot of people are embarrassed about making sounds with their voice. They're afraid to get it wrong. And I guess just to humble me a little, I did make 2 mistakes during the entire meditation, and I realized those, but I just kept going, right? Will that interfere with what I'm trying to do? No, my intent was still the same. My intent was to raise the vibration. My intent was to connect to the compassion of Kuan Yin and her love, and to vibrate and help. It doesn't help just you, because remember, it connects you outside of time and space. So you're raising the vibration of not just you right now, but of everybody who's chanting this mantra throughout the entire history of mankind. So even if it's just a few minutes is better than nothing. Get used to the power of your voice. Your voice is magical. We're made of energy, right? And this energy resonates at a certain frequency. And the highest regards as far as a musician for an instrument, the highest regard in the Druid tradition went to the singers, because they understood that although there were no words to their lyrics, through vibration, they could restore someone's health, someone's balance, someone's vibration. And so getting used to sharing sound, especially like mantras, at least you have a specific sound that you're repeating over and over. And it does bring you to this altered state. This is why we use the japa, we use the beads, right? I have them everywhere, and of course I forgot to bring them to show you today, but and you just repeat each bead, you're repeating your mantra, and then eventually you'll reach the end. You have the choice of stopping there or turning around and doing a circle all over again. If you have difficulty meditating, if for you meditating is difficult because you can't seem to clear your mind, because you seem to be too busy, or you can't seem to sit still, singing mantras is very, very effective, because you have your mental focus. It's the singing of the sound, and a specific sound you're repeating over and over. And because you're singing, you'll tend to sit properly, which means upright in a proper position, so that you can breathe and you can sing out loud or say your mantra. As you focus on this, it will do what meditation is supposed to do, which will clear your mind of worry, as your only focus in the now will be to focus on the particular mantra. So are we ready to try the next mantra, Shanti? Now, this one is easier to remember. It's very short. It's 2 words. For those of you who practice Karuna Reiki will recognize Shanti. Shanti being one of the symbols that we use for healing. So this transcends now, just sutras, and there's in Karuna Reiki power given to Shanti for healing. The symbol represents a lifting and a bringing of new wind, a new energy, a new flow, increasing this flow. And so in a way, it washes away what has been worrying you, making you anxious or making you worry, and allows you to be at peace. So let's try that, shall we? For just a few minutes, because we're almost out of time. But let's try this. So ready? Shanti. 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 Om 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 Shanti. Now, of course, the universe wants you to know that if you don't have a singing voice or a beautiful voice, or you don't think that you can stay on tone, he showed you the perfect example tonight. Oh, I don't recall the last time my voice was so coarse and my throat was so sore. But it doesn't matter, you see. Even though for some reason I'm extremely irritated right now. I'll read that comment in 1 second. It goes to show you, because I do have a better voice normally. And tonight I can see it falter. I can see it go all over the place. And yet I am having a difficult time staying focused on time and being aware that I'm here doing a podcast, because I'm still sinking into this vibrational state and this connection. You don't have to be, this isn't a singing contest. This is a mantra reciting idea, okay? And this is where the idea of compassion toward yourself and allowing yourself to not be perfect comes in. You get points for trying, and you definitely get result from regular practice. So don't look at attaining perfect pitch or perfect melody or perfect sound or the perfect way of saying Shanti or Mani Padme Hum. Focus on the energy, the resonance, and it might actually lead you quickly to fall into a state, a meditative state, where you'll realize, oh, I'm not chanting anymore. I'm not doing my mantra anymore. And yet you will vibrate in the sensation of peace and quiet and feel connected. So zero vote that the idea we are connecting across or outside the time to all who have sung the same words is awe-inspiring, bowing with gratitude for this new awareness. Well, thank you. This is the thing. Even if you just repeat this video, just this segment of this mantra chanting, and you chant along with me, you will eventually gain the confidence of doing it for yourself. So it doesn't matter if you're just settling in the vibration of my voice, which was totally imperfect tonight, or if you're settling into your own. But gain the confidence that as you're singing these mantras, we're not looking for the perfection. Settle for the vibration. See how you're connecting. See how you are reaching deep into who you are inside, to this beautiful soul that you are. This brings me to almost wrapping this beautiful podcast tonight. She's very zen, Kwan Yin. So it's hard to be all happy and motivated. I'm just like, oh, but I'll go meditate now. But I want, at the beginning of the talk, I talked about how she's always in the middle. Well, in the zodiac, she's associated to the Virgo sign, which is, I believe, just about in the middle. And for the day of the month, her day is the 16th. So, counting that we have 31 days in the month, she's about in the middle. Yes, of 31, she's in the middle. Of 28, she's not, but close enough, right? And her day of the week is Thursday. So just depending on when you start your week, if you start your week on a Monday, Thursday would be like the halfway point. So Kuan Yin represents the middle way. She represents the way to releasing all pain and suffering. If you want to know more about the middle way, I encourage you to listen to a previous podcast that I specifically did on the middle way. In that one, I talk more about Buddha and his teaching. But needless to say, that the teaching that she supports in the Dharma of the Buddhist tradition is the teaching of Buddha. And by following these teachings, by being the pillar that supports these teachings, she's helping others, all sentient beings who are willing to learn, to achieve the same results. And this is the beauty of the teaching of Kuan Yin, is we all have the power to achieve this enlightenment state. We just need to put the time and the effort in. So we don't need to have special gifts. We don't need to be unique, and we don't need to be extraordinarily talented in one thing or another. On the contrary, you need to be you. So there's no expectation for you to be like anybody else at all. The only expectation is to be you. So do what you do best, what you're really good at, and live in a peaceful way, live in a kind way. It's not hard to be kind. It's not hard to be gentle. But sometimes we let the material world get to us. We get too worried about things, and we bring our concerns to this material world as opposed to the spiritual world. We're here to learn that lesson. And so that's why it's so difficult, because that's the ultimate goal, is for us to actually learn how to do that. So we're constantly being tested. We're constantly being prodded, and our buttons being pushed. But eventually, if you actually use the tools that each and every one of these podcasts actually give you, there's not just information here, right? There's tools. There's ways to apply this knowledge into your daily life. This is about you learning how to master the soul so that it works for you, and gain the power over the body and the material world around you. So you now become a witness to all of this. Being a witness allows you to realize that if others suffer, there's no way you can be happy. And that's when you start getting more implicated. That's when you start sharing with others. That's when you start helping others, because you can't stand this suffering. The suffering is too great. And as others are being helped, this beautiful movie about paying it forward, it was a big thing. Because if you always want certain people to give you something back, they're not always able to pay it up. They're not always able at this moment in time to give you what you need, but someone else might. And so if we're more open to receiving and to giving, then we will see that we don't live in such an egotistical, selfish world. We live in a world where we're scared. We're isolated, especially right now. and we don't know how to reach out. So for me, to reach out through meditation, to connect to all these beautiful goddesses is one of the ways that I can do it. Don't be afraid to call someone, to text or email. I'm gonna send a hurrah to one of my friends who every day sends me an image, texts me a meme or something. Sometimes it's a prayer, or sometimes it's just a dog goofing off. But every day she sends me a little something, and I think that just that action makes my day, because I know she cares about me, and I know she's thinking about me. And we're all agree right now, even if we call each other, we don't have a whole lot to say. What have you been doing? I've been home for the curfew. Oh, well, you made it in time. Yes, I did. But find ways to reach out to the people that are around you, and letting them know, look, I don't have anything to say, but I'm thinking about you. This is every day. This is the moment, even if it takes 30 seconds. For 30 seconds, I'm the most important thing in her life. And I have many friends like that. Sometimes it's hard for me to keep up, but it's heartwarming that people can do that. And sometimes it's those simple gestures. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It doesn't have to be money related. It doesn't have to be about great gifts, or it's about the gift of time. It's about reminding them that they matter and that they are important. It's about letting them know that their being alive makes your world a better place. And as they do the same for you, then it doesn't seem so awful or so lonely anymore. And so I hope that you'll think about that this week. Yes, I want to finish with the source material. I know that last week we ran out of time, so I usually try to post the source material in the blogs afterwards if you guys want to start reading. One of the things that I noticed, I have quite a few books that I looked at, but some of them are not the best source for information. However, I try to get as many sources as I can. But in cases like Kuan Yin, if you're really curious about her, if you really want to sing those mantras, Buddhist temples open their door normally, on normal times, to everyone. You can get the sutras there. You can be a student in the monastery, even though you're from outside. You don't have to be a nun or a monk. And you can learn the teachings. There's many, many really well-written books, and the best books on the teaching will be found in the monastery. And oftentimes the books will be sold by donation. So it's not an exorbitant amount of money, and you can get the smaller versions, the simplified version, or the more complicated version. However, outside of those sacred texts, I use the Goddess, a World of Myth and Magic by Burley Mitten, the Goddess Book of Days by Diane Stein, The World's Religion by John Bolker, The Book of Goddess by Chris Wilder, The Goddess, Heroes, and Shaman by Scholastics, Goddess Guidance Oracle Cards by Doreen Virtue, Kwan Yin Oracle Cards by Elena Fairchild, and The Seven Sacred Flames by Aurelia Louise Jones. So now we're going to be going into the question time, and we have a little bit of time for questions, so it'll be fantastic. So if you have any questions, please write in your comments right now. Let me know. I got Amelie, I got Kaylin, I got Amanda, I got Ziva, Sarah, I got Dee, I got Chris somewhere, I'm sure. So is there any questions in regards to who Kuan Yin was, what we were teaching, or about the mantra? Anything, anyone? I'm getting a message here that YouTube froze at one point, but I'll give you about 30 seconds. You can message me as well if you're having troubles writing the comment on the live chat. But otherwise, that'll be it for tonight. An hour 25, I don't think it's too bad. Next week, we're going to do the third installment of the Sacred Feminine on the Tara. Tara has different colors. I'm going to try and focusing on the white Tara. Okay, I'll answer that in a second. But I might actually talk about the green one and the blue one as well. It will depend on how much source material I can get for that one particularly. So the question is, someone is curious about her relationship with those who are dying. The idea that you have to go to a Buddhist tradition now. In the Buddhist tradition, people don't die. They only shed their physical form. Their soul continues on living. It's just that it doesn't reach nirvana, which is a state of peace and of love and of being in this light and being warm all the time. It's a state of eternal reincarnation until you reach enlightenment. So therefore, the people who are dying have a chance to reincarnate again based on their accumulated karma. So for that, based on karma, I recommend the 12 Laws of Karma podcast, which I've done quite a ways ago, which explains how karma works, how you accumulate your karma, how you eliminate the bad or accumulate the bad, and how you can restore your karma. And this is the process of reincarnation. We will usually reincarnate in the same energies as we are before. There's no more, let's take Korea, for example. There's no more emperor and there's no more caste of slave. And yet, in the energy, people will still feel like they're slaves. They'll still feel like they're being overpowered by people, or they'll face corruption and things like that. And so it's important that you understand this. So I would recommend go watch the Karma Talk, and so you can understand that, and you understand that she's there to help weigh the karma and decide how much is going to be carried forward and how to balance this debt. That's why she's on the karmic board. But those who are dying right now, they're dying because their time has come. So there's a preset time that is assigned to each of these lives, and during that life, when someone goes, it's their time to go. In cases where someone, we've heard of quite a few of these, will go into the light and decide to turn around because they're being told it's not time yet. Well, that's what it means. Their allotted time has been granted for longer, and so they must return. But giving the awareness that they receive from this near-death experience, they're allowed to change their ways. In fewer cases, their time has come, and they're able to shed this skin and be reborn again. But facing the karmic board, because of what they've been doing during their lifetime and what their endeavor has been, and they might decide that they want to return into this body and continue the work that they're doing without having to relearn to walk and eat and talk and count and knowing all these things now. They can do more good if they return to this existence and continue on. So those are the different choices. The next question, it was love you. Thank you for the start. By the way, I love the straight hair. Thank you. I'm actually having a bad hair day. That's why the hair is straight. And thank you so much. This was great. See you next week. Yes, please come back next week. Same time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And always available afterwards. It's not live. You can't ask your question, but at least the message is still there. That this teaching is still there. It's also available on podcast. And please share with your friends. Let them know that we're doing this, and don't hesitate to tag them and invite them to listen. I don't make any penny from this, but it's always nice to, have more viewers, because it motivates me to do more research and bring you more topics to share the wisdom through all the sisterhood. So I thank you all, and to all, a good night.